She kissed the wrong man. Not the one who broke her heart. Not the one she came to wound. The wrong one entirely. And the room knew it before she did. Hi viewers. Have you ever done something bold in public just to feel like yourself again? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to read every single one. Marceline Viraud was 31 years old and had spent 3 of those years making Darian Cross look like someone worth knowing. She had built his access, curated his reputation, translated his raw ambition into a language that actual power understood. She had done all of this the way most brilliant women do the most important work of their lives, without credit, without title, without a single acknowledgement that the architecture was hers. Tonight she stood in Orem, a private wine lounge in downtown Chicago, where chandeliers from Vienna threw amber across 400 bottles of imported patience, and watched Darian laugh at something another woman said. His shoulder dropped toward her, easy, comfortable, like a man who had already filed the paperwork on a previous life and moved on without notifying the person still living in it. That woman was Marceline. She felt nothing warm, just the cold, specific weight of confirmation the moment a suspicion stops being a suspicion and becomes a fact you have to carry. She turned away from him, and she saw the stranger. Far end of the bar, dark suit, no visible label, glass of something amber in his hand, barely touched. He was not working the room. He was not performing ease. He simply existed in that space, the way certain objects exist without asking for attention, while receiving all of it. His stillness bent the air around him, the way a dense mass bends light. Quiet, absolute, undeniable. Marceline didn't study him. She made a decision. 14 steps across polished marble. One hand placed flat against his chest, the fabric warm, expensive, solid. She leaned up and kissed him. The room did not make a sound. She pulled back after 30 seconds and turned just enough to confirm Darian was watching. Jaw tight. Glass frozen halfway to his mouth. Eyes on her for the first time all night, sharp with something she recognized as wounded pride. Good. That was the plan. Except the stranger hadn't reacted the way men did. He hadn't pulled her closer, hadn't smiled or straightened with male satisfaction. He had simply let it happen. And then, after a beat that lasted slightly too long, he looked at her, not with confusion, not with hunger, with recognition, like she had just confirmed something he already knew. "What are you trying to prove?" he asked, voice low, level. The kind of quiet that didn't need volume to fill a room. "Nothing," she said. He tilted his head 1 degree. That's rarely true. Across the lounge, people had stopped watching Darian Cross. They were watching the man she had kissed, and their expressions were not curiosity. They were caution. That was the first sign, the one she missed entirely. The second came 8 minutes later, when a floor manager approached the stranger, composed on the surface, hands slightly too still at his sides, and whispered something close to his ear. The stranger nodded once without looking at him. The manager withdrew immediately. The stranger looked back at Marceline. "Stay," he said. Not a request, not an invitation. An instruction delivered with the same tone a man uses when he is not accustomed to repeating himself. She should have left. She had a coat at the check station, a car waiting on Michigan Avenue, and every reason in the world to walk out of Orem and let this be the story of a reckless 30 seconds that meant nothing. Instead, she stayed. His name, she would learn later, was Valendrax, and by the time she understood what that name meant in this city, what it controlled, what it had buried, what it was capable of, it was already far too late to pretend the kiss had been nothing, because Valendrax did not believe in accidents. He did not believe in meaningless gestures. To him, everything was intention. Everything had a cost. And Marceline Viraud had just introduced herself. She heard it before she was supposed to. 41 minutes before Marceline arrived at Darian's office suite, for what she believed was a working dinner, she stepped off the elevator on the 14th floor and heard his voice through a door left open 2 careless inches. She stopped. The hallway was empty. The carpet absorbed her footsteps. She stood 3 feet from that gap and did not move. The transition needs to happen before Q2, Darian was saying. His voice carried the specific flatness of a man being efficient. Not cruel, never openly cruel. Just practical. The way people are practical when they have already made a decision, and the conversation is only logistics. Strategic alignment with the Morrow Group requires a more presentable interface going forward. A pause. Then a voice she didn't recognize legal, by its cadence. And the current arrangement, 3 seconds of silence, has served its purpose. Marceline's hands went cold. Not her chest, not her eyes. Her hands the specific physical response of a body that processes devastating information faster than the mind is ready to receive it. She had built his contact list name by name over 31 months. She had called in favors from people who trusted her specifically. Not Darian. Never Darian on his own, because she had relationships with them that predated him by years. She had translated his ambition into a language that rooms full of actual power understood. She had been the interface, the architecture, the reason any door opened, and she had served her purpose. She did not push the door open. She did not let him hear her in that hallway. She turned, walked back to the elevator, and pressed the button with one finger, and watched the floor numbers descend in silence, and kept her hands completely still at her sides, because stillness was the only thing she could fully control right now. In the lobby, she passed Darian's assistant, a woman named Priya, who had worked beside Marceline for 14 months, who had eaten lunch with her, who had watched her work through deadlines that should have broken her. Priya met her eyes for exactly 1 second, then looked at the floor. That was the moment that landed the hardest. Not Darian's voice. Not the clinical language of being quietly retired. It was Priya's eyes, the eyes of someone who already knew, and had decided that knowing was more dangerous than speaking. Marceline walked out through the revolving door into the Chicago cold, and stood on the sidewalk and made a decision. Not an emotional one. Not entirely. She was going to remind Darian Cross exactly what invisible looked like from the outside. She was going to do something small and deliberate and visible. She was going to make him feel, for 30 seconds, the specific weight of watching someone choose someone else in a room full of people who knew you both. She pulled out her phone and texted her closest friend, Zuri, one line. Orem tonight, 9 o'clock, don't ask questions. Zuri responded in 4 seconds, already picking an outfit. That was the plan. A gesture, a moment, a controlled burn. What she had not planned for. What she could not have known. Standing on that sidewalk in her good coat, watching her breath disappear into November air, was that the man she would choose for that gesture already knew her. Name. He had known it for 6 days. She had no idea. By 11 o'clock that night, Marceline would be sitting inside Valen Drax's private car on a street she didn't recognize, holding a business card with nothing printed on it, except a number, trying to remember when exactly she had stopped being the one running the play. So she decided to do something reckless, something small, something that was already someone else's move. The room shifted before she pulled back. Marceline felt it, a pressure change, like the moment before a weather system arrives when the air goes dense and people stop talking without knowing why. She was still 2 inches from his face when Orem collectively held its breath. She stepped back. The stranger looked at her with those camera lens eyes processing, calibrating. Filing in the lounge remained suspended in that particular silence that happens when a room full of carefully composed people all realize at once that something just occurred that they do not fully understand. Darian was watching from the fireplace. She had wanted that. What she had not wanted was the way the room was watching the stranger, with the specific, controlled caution of people who knew something she didn't, who had made the calculation to stay very still and give this man exactly as much space as he required. You made a choice tonight, the stranger said quietly. His eyes moved once to Darian across the room, a single, unhurried glance, then came back to her. You should know what you chose. I kissed a stranger, Marceline said. That's all it was. Then why are you still standing here? She had no answer. He picked up his glass, the amber drink still barely touched, and turned just slightly toward her. which in his economy of movement registered as full attention. Valen, he said, just the one word. His name, offered without the performance most men attach to it. Marceline, she replied. Something moved across his face, small. Gone before she could name it. I know, he said. The floor dropped out from under the conversation. She kept her expression neutral through 11 years of professional discipline and said, You don't know me. Kellner Group acquisition, March of last year, he said evenly. You brokered the access. Cross presented it as his. The Kellner team knew immediately it wasn't his work. The language was too precise, the risk mapping too thorough. They signed anyway because they wanted the access, not the man. Every word accurate. Every word something only 3 people on Earth should have known. Who are you? She asked. Someone who has been watching Cross make the same mistake for 18 months, Valen said. Using assets he didn't build, presenting borrowed intelligence as his own. Eventually that collapses. That's my work you're describing, she said. Yes, he said. It is. He said it without decoration, without sympathy. Just acknowledgement, clean and direct, the way people acknowledge things they have already thoroughly confirmed. Across the room, Darian had moved closer, not approaching, recalculating. Marceline could see the shift in his posture from 30 feet away. He was no longer comfortable. He was measuring. He's going to come over, she said. No, Valen said. He won't. And Darian didn't. He stopped 12 feet away, spoke briefly to the woman beside him, and then slowly, deliberately turned his back to both of them. Marceline watched that happen. Darian Cross, who had spent 3 years benefiting from her ability to read a room, had just read this one correctly for the first time in his life. And it had cost him the only move he had left. She looked at Valen. What do you want? She asked. Not tonight, he said. Tonight you should go home and sleep. Tomorrow things will be different. Different how? He set his glass down and reached inside his jacket and placed a card on the bar beside her hand. Matte black. 1 number. No name. That was all. Call it when you're ready to understand what happened here, he said. He walked away. He did not look back. She stood in Aurum with that card between 2 fingers, and the amber light above her, and the sound of Darian's laughter now audible again, now forced floating across the room, and understood with total clarity that she was no longer inside the plan she had arrived with. She was inside someone else's entirely. And for the first time that night, Darian Cross was not the most important man in the room. He was barely even a footnote. Valen Drax's office had no art on the walls. Marceline noticed that first the deliberate absence of it when she arrived at the West Loop address from the card at 9 to 17 the following morning. 42nd floor of a building, whose lobby listed a financial consultancy on the directory, and nothing above the 39th floor at all. A man in a dark suit met her at the elevator without introducing himself, walked her to a set of glass doors, and left without a word. Valen was at his desk with 2 phones and an open laptop, and the particular posture of someone who had been working for several hours already. He looked up when she entered. Did not stand. Did not gesture toward a chair. You called, he said. You expected me to. She replied. Yes. She sat without being invited, crossed one leg over the other, kept her hands loose in her lap, because she had learned a long time ago that your hands tell a room what your face won't. You knew my name last night before I said it, she said. Explain that. I've been building a case on Darian Cross for 11 months, Valen said. You appear in that case extensively, not as a subject. He paused. As the actual source of everything he claimed to produce. She absorbed that. What kind of case? She asked. The kind that ends careers, he said, and occasionally ends other things. The room was very quiet. 42 floors up, Chicago's noise became a low, distant hum, the sound of a city that would not notice whatever happened in this room. You said last night that tomorrow things would be different, she said. What did you do? Valen opened a folder on his desk and turned it toward her without standing up. She leaned forward. Wire transfers, shell company registrations, a routing structure. She recognized she had seen Darian reference one of those account names in an email 14 months ago and had not understood what she was looking at. She understood now. He moved assets into the Morrow Group infrastructure the morning after the lounge, Valen said, as a gesture of good faith, to buy their protection. What did he offer them? Valen looked at her steadily. Your contact list, he said. He sent them the version you emailed him 18 months ago. The cold came back to her hands. She had sent him that list on a Tuesday in March, from her personal laptop, because she had trusted him with it the way you trust someone with the combination to something you have spent years building. Not because you are naive, because you believe the person has earned it. Betrayal by trust is different from betrayal by deception. Deception requires the other person to be a stranger. Trust betrayal requires them to have been something real. That is why it lands the way it does all the way down. He doesn't get to sell my work to protect himself, she said. No, Valen agreed. He doesn't. He closed the folder. You see patterns, he said. You see them faster than most analysts I employ. You read a room the way other people read text instinctively, completely, without effort. Last night you walked into Aram in a dress you'd never worn and made a decision in under 3 minutes that shifted the entire social structure of that event. He paused. You did that on emotion. Imagine what you do with intention. She looked at him. What exactly are you offering me? Work, he said. Specific, serious work. Your name on it. Your terms negotiated before you begin. Complete transparency about what I do and what you would be adjacent to. And what do you do, Valen? He held her gaze for a moment. I correct imbalances, he said. That was not a full answer. She knew it. He knew she knew it. You don't move alone anymore, he said. Effective as of this morning. You don't get to decide that. Someone followed you from Orem last night, he said. Dark blue sedan, partial plate, Lima Romeo 7. They parked outside your building for 4 hours. He picked up one of his phones, turned it toward her. A still image, grainy, time-stamped, unmistakably her street. Her address, her building, 4 hours. That's not Darian, she said slowly. No, Valen said. It's not. He set the phone down. That's why you don't move alone anymore, he said. That's not a restriction. That is the only sentence I have said to you that is entirely about keeping you alive. The room was very still. Outside, 42 floors below, Chicago moved and hummed and continued without awareness of this office, this folder, this conversation that had just quietly rearranged the geography of Marceline Viro's life. She looked at the blank walls. She looked at the man behind the desk, who had known her name before she said it, and had been building a case for 11 months and had a photograph of her street taken at 2 a.m. She made a calculation. I want a written agreement, she said. Terms in writing before I do anything. Already drafted, he said. He opened his desk drawer and placed a document in front of her. 12 pages. Her name was on the first line. He had expected this too. She picked up the document and began to read, and that was when she understood she had not walked into his office this morning. She had walked into a plan that had been waiting for her to arrive. That was the part that unsettled her the most. Not the file on his desk, not the shell accounts, not the surveillance photograph of her street at 2 a.m. It was the specificity. On her third day inside Valen's organization, working from a secondary office 2 floors below his, Marceline pulled a summary document from the shared drive she'd been granted access to and found 6 months of annotated intelligence on Darian Cross that was more precise than anything Darian had ever produced about himself. Meeting logs, deal timelines, a complete map of every contact he had leveraged, every name from her list that he had converted into a relationship he now claimed as his own, with dates, outcomes, and the specific language he had used to present each one as organic. She read it for 40 minutes without moving. Then she closed the file and sat in the particular quiet of a person, recalibrating their understanding of how long they had been watched, and by how many different people. Valen appeared in the doorway at 4:20 p.m. You found the cross summary, he said. You mapped 18 months of his activity, she said. Meeting by meeting. 22 months, Valen said. Why? He walked in and sat across from her, not at the head of the table, but across, which she had begun to notice was deliberate. He did not position himself above. He positioned himself level. Because men like Cross don't build anything, he said. They find people who build and attach themselves. When the builder gets discarded, Cross takes the structure and repaints it. I wanted to document the full cycle before I moved, and I was the builder, she said. You were the builder, he confirmed, without weight, without pity, just the clean acknowledgement of a fact. She looked at the closed laptop in front of her. Your people move differently than anyone I've worked with, she said. Nobody raises their voice. Nobody over-explains. There's no performance. Performance is for people who need to convince someone, Valen said. My people don't need to convince anyone of anything, including you, especially me. She had been inside his world for 72 hours and had already identified 3 things that did not line up with the profile she'd constructed of him from the outside. He answered direct questions directly. No deflection, no redirection, no strategic vagueness when a straight answer would serve. He ate lunch at his desk every day at 12:45, with no ceremony and no audience. And he had not once, in 3 days, told her what to do with her own work. He had given her access. He had given her a system. He had left her alone inside it. You're not going to manage me, she said. A statement, not a question. No, he said. Darian managed me constantly, she said. Every output, every introduction. He wanted to know what I was going to say before I said it. Because he didn't understand what you were doing, Valen said. And he was afraid of what you'd do without his framing on it. She absorbed that. You're not afraid of that, she said. I know exactly what you're capable of, he said. I've been reading your work for 11 months. I don't need to manage it. I need to get out of its way. Outside the window, Chicago ran its late afternoon logistics deliveries, commutes, the industrial rhythm of a city that kept moving regardless of what any single room contained. Marceline watched it for a moment. Someone's still watching my building, she said. Yes, Valen said. 2-person rotation now. Different vehicle. Do you know who they work for? We're confirming, he said. By tomorrow morning we'll have a name. And then? He looked at her. And then, he said, we'll know whether this is Darian escalating or something that started before Darian became relevant. That was a sentence with a very specific weight to it. She held it. You think this isn't about Darian, she said. Valen said nothing, which was its own answer. Marceline closed the laptop and leaned back and looked at the ceiling of an office 40 floors above a city she thought she understood, and let herself feel, for the first time since the hallway on the 14th floor, the full scope of how far the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She had come to Orem 3 nights ago, with a plan that fit inside a single evening. She was now inside something that had been in motion for almost 2 years, and the man across from her, the one who had known her name, built the file, drafted the agreement before she arrived, and had a photograph of her street at 2 a.m., had still not told her everything. She was certain of that. What aren't you telling me? She asked. Valen looked at her for a long moment. Several things, he said. You'll earn them in order. She nodded once. That night, alone in the car they assigned to take her back across the city, she watched Chicago through tinted glass and thought about the word earn, the specific way he had used it. Not as a test, not as a withholding, as a sequence, like there was a shape to what was coming, and she was already inside it. And the only question now was how far she was willing to go to see it through to its end. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. 1 line of text. You should ask him about the Morrow Group's original investor. She stared at it. The car moved through evening traffic. The message disappeared 30 seconds after she read it. The thread gone, the number already dead. And somewhere behind her in the city, a man she had not yet met made a phone call, said 4 words, and set the next chapter of her life in motion, without her knowledge or consent. The girl was crying in a language that had no words. Marceline heard it before she saw it, a sound coming from behind the frosted glass of the small conference room at the end of the east corridor. Not loud. The specific contained kind of crying that happens when someone has practiced not being heard for a very long time. She slowed. Through the glass panel, she saw Valen. He was crouched down. Not standing over, the girl crouched, at her exact eye level, in a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, on a floor that didn't officially exist in a building that didn't list his name anywhere. His elbows rested on his knees. His posture carried none of the precision she had come to associate with every movement he made in every other context. He was completely still, not the controlled stillness of a man managing a room, the stillness of a man choosing, deliberately, to take up less space than the person in front of him. The girl was young, early 20s at most, with natural hair pulled back and red-rimmed eyes, and the specific exhaustion of someone running on a deficit that had been accumulating for years. She had both hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. Valen said something. Marceline couldn't hear the words through the glass. But she watched the girl's shoulders the way they dropped 1 inch when he spoke, the way the rigid line of her spine softened by a fraction, the way she nodded, slowly, like someone who hadn't been given a reason to nod in a long time and was relearning the motion. He reached into his jacket and produced a folded envelope. He placed it on the table beside her mug, did not push it toward her, did not make it a transaction, just set it down and left it there, the way you leave something for a person who needs to feel like they chose to pick it up. The girl looked at it, then looked at him, then picked it up with both hands. Valen stood, and turned, and saw Marceline through the glass. He did not look away. He did not explain. He held her gaze for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to confirm she had seen it, short enough to make clear he was not going to discuss it, and then moved toward the door. Marceline walked. She made it to the end of the corridor before she stopped and stood with one hand on the wall, and let herself feel the full weight of what she had just witnessed. Not the envelope, not the girl's tears, the crouching, the deliberate, costly choice to put himself at eye level with someone who had nothing, and give her his full attention like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. A man who controlled territory across 4 states, crouching on a floor, for a girl with a mug and red eyes. She was still thinking about it 40 minutes later when Valen appeared beside her at the document room door. "Ready?" he said. "Where are we going?" "Dinner meeting. South Loop. I need your read on someone." She gathered her things. They took the elevator down in silence. In the lobby, he moved without announcement to the left side of her, positioning himself between her and the building's main entrance, with a naturalness that made it invisible, not performance. Adjustment. His hand came to the small of her back as they moved through the door, brief, directional, gone before it registered as anything other than navigation. She noticed it. She did not comment. Outside, the Chicago evening had gone cold and sharp, the kind of November air that clarifies everything it touches. The car was already waiting. Valen opened the door himself, no driver stepping out, no ceremony, and she got in, and he followed, and the city moved past the windows in amber and white. "Who is the girl?" Marceline asked. The silence lasted 4 seconds. "My sister," he said. She did not push. He did not offer more. They rode the rest of the way to the South Loop in quiet, and Marceline looked out at Chicago and thought about a man who built empires and crouched on floors, and how those two things lived inside the same person, and what it meant that she was only now beginning to see the second one. The dinner meeting lasted 90 minutes. The man across the table smiled too wide and held eye contact 2 seconds too long on every sentence, and rearranged the facts of 3 separate deals in ways so smooth most people wouldn't catch the seam. Marceline caught every one. On the ride back, Valen looked at her. "Well," he said. "He's been skimming from the Hartwell account for at least 8 months. She said. "The eye contact is compensation. He holds it longer when he's reframing something." And he touched his left cuff link 4 times during the Meridian discussion, which was the only topic where the numbers were actually wrong. Valen looked at her for a long moment. 8 months, he said quietly. "Our internal estimate was 6. She looked out the window. "He's been doing it longer than he thinks, you know." she said. The car moved through the city. Valen said nothing for 90 seconds. Then, you were right about him. You were right before I finished asking the question. I know, she said. She wasn't being arrogant. She was being accurate. There was a difference, and Valendrax she was learning understood that difference completely. What she did not expect was what he said next. He wasn't the reason we went tonight, he said. She turned to look at him. His eyes were on the city outside his window. You were, he said. I needed to see how fast you work in a live environment, under social pressure, without preparation. She stared at him. You used me as a test, she said. I used tonight as a confirmation, he said. There's a difference. The car stopped in front of her building. She got out without a word. She was 3 steps from the door when she heard his window come down. Marceline. She stopped, did not turn. The man at dinner, Valen said. He's connected to whoever has been watching your building. She turned then, but the window was already going up. The car pulled away, and she stood on her sidewalk in the November cold and understood that tonight had not been a dinner meeting. It had been the opening move of something she didn't have a name for yet, and Valendrax was already 6 steps ahead of wherever she thought she was. He said it like it cost him nothing. That was how she knew it cost him everything. It was past midnight on a Thursday. The office had emptied 3 hours earlier, the last of Valen's people, moving out with the quiet efficiency of a tide going out. The city below the windows had shifted into its late register. Fewer lights moving, more lights fixed. The long amber stillness of Chicago after the useful hours. Marceline was at the secondary workstation with a financial pattern map she had been building for 6 days. Valen was at his desk with a glass of scotch he had poured at 10 o'clock and not touched since. She had stopped asking why he poured drinks he didn't drink. The man from the South Loop dinner, she said without looking up. Reeves. His connection to whoever is watching my building. Is it through the Morrow Group, or is it older than that? Older, Valen said. How much older? Silence. She looked up. He was looking at the window. Not at her, not at the city, at the glass itself, at his own reflection in it. 11 years, he said. She set her pen down. That's not a Darien Cross timeline, she said. No, he said. It isn't. He picked up the glass, held it, set it back down. My father built the first version of this organization, he said. Not what it is now, what it was. Smaller, rougher, built on relationships that required maintenance. I was not old enough to understand. A pause. He had a partner in the Morrow Group, a man named Calloway. They ran capital together for 8 years. Marceline did not move. When my father died, Valen continued, Calloway expected the organization to pass to him. He had structured the partnership that way on paper. He had spent 4 years making sure every external relationship was in his name, rather than my father's. But it didn't pass to him, Marceline said. No, Valen said. It passed to me. How old were you? 22. She did the math. Calloway has been moving against you for 11 years, she said. Slowly, Valen said. Patiently. Every few years a new angle. He's not a man who rushes. He builds. He waits. He removes pieces from the board one at a time and waits to see if anyone notices. And Darien Cross, she said. Darien Cross is not smart enough to have found the Morrow Group on his own, Valen said. He was introduced, given an entry point, told exactly what to offer and what to ask for. He was used, Marceline said. The way people like Calloway always use people like Cross, Valen said. Disposably, with full knowledge that when the structure collapses, Cross absorbs all visible damage and Calloway's name appears nowhere. The room was very quiet. She had mapped the financial pattern across 6 days and had seen the shape of something large and patient and deliberate. She had not had a name for the center of it until right now. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Valen turned from the window and looked at her directly. Because you sent me a question this afternoon, he said, about the Morrow Group's original investor, and I said you would earn the answers in order. He paused. You've earned this one. She remembered the text message in the car. The unknown number, The 30-second disappearing thread. She had mentioned it to no one. She had assumed Valen already knew about it. "Did you send that text?" she asked. "No," he said. The cold came back to her hands. "Then who did?" He looked at her with those camera lens eyes processing, confirming, making a decision she could see forming but not yet read. "Someone inside Calloway's organization who wants out," he said. "Someone who knows you're here and wants you to push for this information faster than I was giving it." "Why me specifically?" "Because," Valen said, "you are the only new variable in this situation. Everything else Calloway has mapped and anticipated for years. You he did not see coming." She sat with that. A woman who had spent 3 years being the invisible architecture of someone else's ambition had just been told she was the one variable a patient, dangerous man had failed to calculate. "He doesn't know what I do," she said slowly. "He knows you exist," Valen said. "He does not know what you can see." He stood then and moved away from his desk, not toward her, but to the window, and stood with his hands in his pockets, looking down at the city below. "My father used to say that the most dangerous person in any room is the one everyone else has already decided isn't worth watching," he said. He learned that too late. She looked at his back, at the line of his shoulders, at the particular stillness of a man who had been carrying something heavy for 11 years and had gotten so accustomed to the weight that he no longer adjusted his posture around it. "They didn't see you either," she said quietly. He did not move. "Your father's partner," she said. "Calloway." He looked at a 22-year-old and decided you were manageable, decided you were a temporary inconvenience between him and what he wanted. She paused. "He built 11 years of strategy around the assumption that you were something he could eventually remove." Valen turned from the window. "Yes," he said. "They didn't see you," she said again. "They used the idea of you, the young one, the unproven one, the one who inherited something he hadn't earned yet. They built a whole architecture around a version of you that was never actually you." He looked at her across the room. "I was built the same way," she said. "Darian didn't see me. He saw a function, something that produced outputs he could present as his own. The actual person, what I thought, what I could do, what I was building toward that was invisible to him, completely." She paused. "That specific kind of not being seen, it does something to you. It makes you doubt the parts of yourself that were never the problem." The room held that. Valen crossed to the chair across from her workstation and sat. Not at his desk. Not in the position of the person running the organization. Across from her. Equal. "I stopped trusting my own judgment at 24, he said. 2 years in. Calloway had moved against 3 of my closest people. Not overtly, just quietly discredited them. Removed their access. Made sure they were gone before I understood what was happening." He looked at his hands. "I rebuilt. But there was a year where I didn't trust a single read I made. Every decision felt like a potential Calloway move I hadn't seen yet." "What brought you back?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. "I stopped trying to outthink him," he said, "and started documenting everything instead. Just recording what was actually happening, accurately, without interpretation. After 6 months of that, I could see his pattern clearly. And once I could see his pattern, I stopped being afraid of it." She understood that completely. That was exactly what she had done with Darian. Not immediately, not cleanly, but eventually. She had started keeping records, quiet ones, dates, outputs, who received what and when. Not as ammunition, as anchor, as proof to herself that what she was experiencing was real. "We both built the same defense," she said. He looked at her. "Yes," he said. "We did." The city moved 40 floors below them. Neither of them spoke for a full minute, and it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the specific quiet of 2 people who have just recognized the shape of the same scar and don't need to fill the space with anything more than acknowledgement. "I've never told anyone that," he said finally. "The year of not trusting myself." "I know," she said. She didn't explain how she knew. Some things you recognize not because you were told, but because you lived an adjacent version of them and the shape is unmistakable. He stood after a moment, straightened his jacket. The precision came back not as a mask, but as a return to the self he had built out of the damage. She understood now that those were not different things. The controlled stillness was not a performance over something broken. It was what the broken thing had become after 11 years of deliberate rebuilding. "Go home," he said. "Sleep." "What happens tomorrow?" she asked. "Tomorrow," he said, "we find out who inside Calloway's organization sent you that text, and then we decide how to use them." She stood and gathered her things. At the door she stopped. "Valen." He looked up. "The year you didn't trust yourself," she said. "You came back from it." He held her gaze. "So did you," he said. She walked out. In the elevator going down, she pressed her back against the wall and looked at the ceiling and let herself feel the full weight of what had just happened in that room. Not the intelligence about Calloway, not the strategy, not the file or the pattern or the timeline, the recognition. Two people who had been made into instruments by the people who should have seen them meeting across a workstation at midnight and naming it out loud for the first time. That was the moment. Not the kiss in the lounge, not the agreement, not the dinner or the test or the car ride through November Chicago. This. And somewhere across the city, a man named Calloway received a single notification on a secured device, and for the first time in 11 years, he made a mistake. He underestimated how much had already changed. The routing code appeared at 9:47 on a Tuesday morning, and Marceline stared at it for 4 minutes before she moved. Not because she didn't understand it, because she understood it completely, and what it meant required 4 minutes of very still, very controlled breathing before she was ready to walk it into Valen's office. The Voss account, a shell dormant for 19 months, listed in the organizational architecture as a legacy structure with no active function, had processed a transfer, $2.3 million, routed through 3 intermediate accounts in under 6 hours. Clean on the surface, the timestamps matched business hours. The authorization codes were valid. Everything about it was correct. That was the problem. Shells don't self-activate. Dormant accounts don't move capital without a hand on them. And the Voss account's routing code existed in exactly 3 places inside Valen's organization: his own access terminal, the senior operations file, and 1 secondary clearance held by a man named Devante Okafor, who had been with Valen for 9 years, and who Valen trusted, with the kind of trust that doesn't get discussed because it has never been questioned. She walked to Valen's office. He was on a call. She walked in anyway. He looked at her face and ended the call mid-sentence. She placed the transfer document on his desk without speaking. He read it. The silence lasted 11 seconds, she counted. And in those 11 seconds, Valen Drax did not change expression once. What happened instead was more precise, a stillness that was different from his usual stillness, denser, the kind of quiet that comes just before something very large and very deliberate begins to move. "When?" he said. "Initiated at 11:14 last night," she said. "Cleared by 5:40 this morning." "Authorization code?" She pointed to the line. He looked at it. "That's Devante's clearance," he said. "Yes," she said. He stood. He walked to the window with his hands at his sides and stood there for 30 seconds and looked at Chicago below and said nothing. She did not fill the silence. She had learned that his silences were load-bearing, that what he was doing inside them was not processing emotion, but building a decision, the way a structure gets built from the foundation up, one calculated layer at a time. "Pull the full transfer chain," he said. "Every intermediate account it touched between Voss and the destination." "I already did," she said. She placed the second document beside the first. He came back to the desk. She had mapped the transfer across 4 linked accounts, traced the destination to a holding structure she didn't recognize, and flagged a pattern the same intermediate account had been used in a smaller transfer 8 months ago, routed through a different shell, but terminating at a connected node. 2 transactions. Same architecture. 8 months apart. "This isn't the first time," she said. "This is the second time we can see. There may be more that don't show the same signature." Valen looked at the map for a long moment. "Calloway," he said. The destination node connects to a property holding in Delaware that appears in the Morrow Group's secondary filings, she said. It's 3 steps removed. But it's there. He sat down. She watched him take the full weight of what she had placed in front of him, not just the transfer, but the implication. Someone inside his organization. Someone with clearance. Someone he had trusted for 9 years. Long enough for the trust to become structural, the kind you stop examining because its presence has always been load-bearing. Devante knew about the Calloway timeline, Valen said. I told him 3 weeks ago, when I decided to move the documentation to an active case file. She understood what that meant. Devante hadn't leaked the information before Valen moved it to active status. He had waited, which meant he hadn't panicked. He had calculated. He had assessed the new timeline, measured his risk window, and moved $2.3 million in a single overnight operation with 9 years of established trust as his cover. That was not desperation. That was patience. Calloway's patience, running through a man Valen had trusted with his sister's security on 3 separate occasions. He knew about Amara, Valen said. His voice was entirely level. That was how she knew the statement had cost him something significant to say out loud. Yes, she said quietly. He said nothing for 40 seconds. Then he looked at her. Who else knows about this transfer? No one, she said. I came to you directly. Good, he said. Keep it that way. I need 48 hours before this moves. Devante will check the access logs, she said. He'll know someone pulled the transfer chain. Yes, Valen said. He will. He opened his laptop. That's fine, he said. Let him check. She understood. Valen was not trying to hide the fact that someone had found it. He was letting Devante know the clock had started. He was watching what a 9-year man did when he realized he'd been seen, whether he ran, whether he reached out to Calloway, whether he tried to cover or tried to confess. The response would tell Valen everything he needed to know about how deep this went. She picked up her documents. Marceline, he said. She stopped. The text you received in the car 3 weeks ago, he said. The unknown number that told you to ask about the Morrow Group's original investor. Yes, she said. We identified the source this morning, he said. It was sent from a device registered to Devante Okafor's personal account. She went very still. He sent me the warning, she said. Yes, Valen said. But he's also moving Calloway's capital. Yes, Valen said again. She worked it. A man playing both sides, feeding intelligence to the new variable to her while simultaneously moving money for the enemy. Either he was being coerced, or he was running a double that neither side had fully mapped. Or he was something more complicated than either of those options, caught in the specific, impossible position of a person who had already gone too far in one direction, and was desperately, quietly trying to create an exit before the structure collapsed on him. He's not Calloway's man, she said slowly. He's Calloway's hostage. Valen looked at her. That's what I believe, he said. Then he's not the threat, she said. No, Valen said. He's the bridge. If we move on him directly, we lose the only live connection we have to Calloway's current operation. If we leave him in place, Calloway gets the capital and another 8 months. She looked at the transfer document, at the routing code, at the $2.3 million that had moved overnight, through a shell and 3 intermediary accounts, to a Delaware property holding 3 steps removed from a man who had been patiently dismantling Valen's organization for 11 years. There's a third option, she said. Valen waited. We use him, she said, actively. We give Devante something real enough to pass to Calloway, something that looks like the break he's been waiting for. And when Calloway moves on it, we're already inside the move. The room was quiet. That requires Devante's cooperation, Valen said. He sent me a warning text from his personal device, she said. He's already asking for a way out. He just doesn't know if there is one. Valen leaned back. He looked at her across the desk with those precise, processing eyes, and in that look, she saw the specific quality of a man who had spent 11 years calculating alone and was only now, for the first time, sitting across from someone whose calculation ran at the same speed as his. "Can you get him to meet you without Calloway knowing?" Valen asked. "Yes," she said. "How?" "Because he already trusts me," she said. "He sent me the message. He picked me. I just have to give him a reason to believe I'm the door out, not the door further in." Valen nodded once. Outside, the city ran its Tuesday afternoon operations without awareness of a transfer document, a dormant shell, a 9-year man caught between two directions, and a woman who had arrived in this building 12 days ago with a business card and no plan beyond survival. 48 hours, Valen said. 48 hours, she confirmed. She walked out. In the corridor, she pulled out her phone and opened a new message draft. No recipient yet, no text, and held it in both hands, and understood that what she was about to do in the next 2 days would either close the 11-year gap between Valen and Calloway, or collapse everything they had built in the last 3 weeks into something neither of them could recover from. Her hands were steady. She had been the invisible one for 3 years, the background architecture, the function no one named, and now, for the first time, she was the move. The one Calloway had not seen coming, the one nobody had put on the board, and the clock had already started, whether she was ready or not. Devante Okafor agreed to meet in 11 minutes. That was the first sign that he had been waiting. Marceline sent the message from a secondary device. Valen's team had prepped 3 words. "I know. Meet me. No address. No time." Devante responded with a location and a time before she had set the phone down. A man who deliberates does not respond in 11 minutes. A man who has been sitting with a decision already made, waiting only for someone to open the door, he responds in 11 minutes. The location was a coffee shop in Pilsen. Unremarkable. The kind of place where nobody's face is notable. Marceline arrived 7 minutes early, took a table with a sightline to both the front entrance and the service corridor, ordered black coffee she didn't intend to drink, and sat with her hands flat on the table. Devante walked in at exactly the time he had specified. He was taller than she had imagined from the file, mid-40s, broad-shouldered, moving with the particular careful ease of a large man who had spent years making himself appear smaller and less threatening than he was. His eyes found her immediately. He walked straight to the table without scanning the room. He sat. Neither of them spoke for 4 seconds. "How much do you know?" he said. "The Voss transfer," she said. "The Delaware node, the Morrow Group connection. The transfer 8 months ago through the Calder shell." She paused. "And the text you sent me from your personal device." He looked at the table. "That was a mistake," he said. "The text. It was the only honest thing you've done in 8 months, she said. He looked up at her, then sharp, briefly, and she held it without adjusting her expression. "He has my brother," Devante said. The table went very still. "Calloway?" she said. "Took him 4 years ago," Devante said. "Not physically, financially. My brother had a business, small, legitimate, 7 employees. Calloway's people structured a loan through a shell company my brother didn't know was connected. When the balloon payment came due, they owned the building, the inventory, and had my brother's personal guarantee on $200,000 of debt that didn't exist 18 months before." He said it the way people describe something they have rehearsed in their own mind so many times it has lost its sharpest edges. But the flatness was thin, and underneath it was something that had not actually stopped being sharp at all. "He told you to move the capital or the debt gets called," she said. "He told me to move the capital or my brother loses everything he built and goes to prison on fraud charges that Calloway's people will fabricate well enough to stick." Devante said. "Yes." She looked at him. "How long have you been feeding him information?" "Selectively," Devante said. "I never gave him anything that directly harmed Valen or the organization. I moved 3 transfers over 8 months. Smaller ones, first amounts that would clear without pattern detection. Last week's was the largest." He stopped. "He's accelerating. The window he's been working toward, I don't know what it is exactly, but the capital is moving faster now. Something is coming." "When?" she asked. "Within 10 days, he said. "That's my read. He's been patient for 11 years, and something has changed his timeline." She knew what had changed his timeline. Hair, the new variable. The woman Calloway hadn't calculated, who had walked into Orem and kissed a man she didn't know and set a chain of events in motion that had compressed 11 years of patient strategy into something with a visible edge. "I need you to do one more thing for Calloway," she said. Devante looked at her. "I need you to pass him something," she said. "From us. Something that looks like the break he's been waiting for, an opening in Valen's operations that gives him a specific window to move." "And when he moves on it," Devante said. "He won't be moving into an opening," she said. "He'll be moving into a structure we've already built around him." Devante was quiet for a long moment. "If this goes wrong," he said, "Calloway burns my brother." "If you do nothing," she said, "Calloway burns your brother anyway. Because once he's done with you, he removes you. That's always been the end game." He knew that. She could see it in his face, the confirmation of something he had been refusing to fully look at for 4 years. "What do I pass him?" Devante said. "I'll have it to you within 24 hours, she said. "It will be real enough to be convincing, specific enough that he'll want to move on it immediately." She paused. "And the moment he moves, we have him on active operation. Not theory, not pattern live action. That's federal territory. Calloway goes away and your brother's debt disappears with him because the instrument that created it is fraudulent on its face." Devante picked up his coffee. "Set it down without drinking. Valen knows you're here?" he said. "Yes," she said. "And he's not burning me." "Not if you help us close this," she said. "What you've done stays inside the organization. Your brother's situation stays private." Valen's word. She watched him absorb that. 9 years of loyalty, fractured by 4 years of coercion, and now a door offered by the woman nobody had seen coming. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. He stood. Stopped. "You know he's going to move on Valen directly," Devante said. "Not just financially. He's been building toward a moment where Valen has no options. That's what the capital is funding." "I know," she said. "You need to be faster than he expects," Devante said. "We will be," she said. He left. She sat alone with the untouched coffee and the noise of a Pilsen Tuesday, and mapped the next 72 hours in her head, the information packet she would build, the specific language Calloway would need to hear, the window they would create, and the walls they would build around it before he arrived. She called Valen. He picked up on the first ring. "He's in," she said. A pause. "And Calloway?" Valen said. 10 days, she said. "Maybe less." "Then we have 7, Valen said. She stood, gathered her things, and walked out into the Pilsen afternoon, the city moving around her, indifferent and enormous, unaware that in 7 days, 11 years of patience was going to meet something it had never accounted for. The operation ran for 6 days. On day 4, Marceline delivered the intelligence packet to Devante, a fabricated operational vulnerability in Valen's West Loop infrastructure, detailed enough to be credible, structured with 3 specific time windows that would look, to Calloway, like a gap his people could enter cleanly. On day 5, Devante passed it. On day 6, at 7:14 p.m., 41 minutes after the building should have been clear, Calloway's people moved. They used keyed access Devante's credentials, provided by Calloway's team from a copy made 18 months ago. They entered through the lower level. 3 men, coordinated, quiet, moving with the specific efficiency of people who believed they were walking into an empty building. They were not walking into an empty building. Marceline was at her workstation on the 3rd floor with the internal comm architecture already open. The network she had mapped across 4 weeks, the pattern she understood better than anyone in the building except Valen. She did not run. She pulled the spoofed timestamp from the access log, corrected it to real time, traced the 3 entry signatures across the floor map, and sent Valen's security team a location marker and 9 words. "East stairwell. All 3. Don't use the elevator. Go now." It took 4 minutes. It was enough. When Valen found her in the document room 20 minutes later, she was still at the screen, cross-referencing the access signatures against Calloway's external communications, to build the evidentiary chain that would survive a federal review. He stood in the doorway. "You stayed," he said. "I had work to finish," she said. He crossed the room. He stopped close enough that she could feel the warmth coming off him in the cold air of the building, and could see in his face something she had not seen there before. Not gratitude, not relief. Something older and quieter and more costly than either of those things. He put his hand against her face, thumb at her cheekbone, not asking, not performing, just there, present. The way you touch something you almost lost before you were ready to name what it was. She did not move away. "You built the exit for Devante," he said quietly. "Yes," she said. "And the packet. The window." "Yes, you did all of that in 6 days," he said. 5, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. "Calloway's people are in federal custody," he said. His communications were live when they entered the building. The federal case activates on his direct order to breach. 11 years of financial documentation. Yours and mine both goes to the U.S. Attorney's office tomorrow morning. She exhaled, not dramatically. Just released a breath she had been holding for 6 days. Maybe longer. "Devante," she said. "Cooperating witness," Valen said. "His brother's debt is being challenged through a separate civil filing. It won't survive review. The shell that created it collapses with Calloway's structure." She nodded. Darian Cross had been formally named in the federal financial investigation 3 days earlier. A parallel case, 19 counts, built from the documentation she had helped assemble, and the Morrow Group's own records once Calloway's immunity from that direction evaporated. She had not watched the press conference. She didn't need to. Some forms of justice don't require witnesses. They just require the right structure, the right documentation, and the right person who knows how to see the pattern before it sees them. Valen's hand was still at her face. "I need to say something," he said. "Say it," she said. "In the lounge," he said. "The night you walked up and kissed me. I had been watching Cross for 11 months. I knew your name. I had your file." He paused. "But I did not know what you would do when you lost the thing you had built your access on. I did not know if you would rebuild or collapse." "And," she said, "you rebuilt in 72 hours, he said. "You walked into my office with your hand steady and read the entire situation correctly before I had finished explaining it." He looked at her. "I have never worked with anyone who operates the way you do." "That's not what you wanted to say," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "No," he said. "It isn't." "Then say the other thing," she said. His thumb moved slightly against her cheekbone. "I did not expect you," he said simply. "In 11 years, in everything Calloway built, and everything I built against it, I did not account for you. And I don't know what to do with that except tell you." She looked at him, at the scar along his jaw, at the eyes that processed everything and showed almost nothing, and were showing her something now, carefully, deliberately, like a man who has learned to open doors very slowly because he has been standing behind them for a very long time. "That's the most honest thing you've said to me," she said. "Yes," he said. She reached up and covered his hand with hers, and held it there. Neither of them moved for a long moment in the cold. Quiet office, 40 floors above a city that did not know what had just been dismantled. Within it, 11 years of patience and damage, and a debt that had finally come due. And Darian Cross stood behind a microphone 3 days later, small and exposed under press lights, looking at no one, while the woman he had quietly erased sat 40 floors above the city she had just helped reshape, with her hand covering the hand of a man who had known her name before she said it, and had never once decided she had served her purpose. Valen placed the document on the desk at 10 a.m. on a Monday. 1 page, her name at the top, a single paragraph below it. "This dissolves everything between us formally," he said. "Contractually, completely, no obligation, no continuation." She looked at it. "The Calloway case is federal now," he said. "You testified to the documentation. Your role is on record. You don't need this organization to have standing anymore. You have your own." She picked up the document. "Read it slowly. Set it down. And if I stay?" she said. He looked at her the way he had looked at her in the document room, the night Calloway's people came through the building with that careful, costly openness of a man who had spent 11 years moving behind glass and had chosen, deliberately, to step through. "Then you stay because you chose it," he said. "Not the contract, not the threat, not because you had nowhere else to go." She left the document unsigned on the desk. She crossed the room. And the kiss, their first real one, not a gesture in a wine lounge designed to wound someone who wasn't worth the wound, but the thing itself was confirmation. The word made physical. The answer to a question 11 weeks in the making. Not persuasion. Proof. She kept her office on the floor below his. She kept her name. Marceline Viro Consulting launched 14 months later. Organizational intelligence, executive risk mapping, pattern analysis for institutions that needed someone who could read a room before the room finished arranging itself. Within 2 years, she had 11 clients. None of them knew the others existed. All of them trusted her completely. She built a separate program unfunded from Valen's organization, funded from her own earnings for women who had been used as infrastructure by people who called it partnership. She knew the specific shape of that loss. She had an exact map of the way back from it. The program ran quarterly workshops and a private referral network, and had helped 43 women in its first 18 months build the thing that had been taken from them. Documented proof of their own work, in their own name, in their own hands. Valen transitioned the organization across 4 years. Legal acquisitions, regulatory compliance built from the ground up. 2 foundations. One for financial literacy in under-resourced communities. One that funded legal challenges to predatory debt instruments, which was Devante's suggestion, and which Valen funded without discussion. Devante stayed. His brother reopened the business under his own name with no debt attached to it. It took 11 months for the federal case against Calloway to go to trial. The verdict was returned in 4 days. The man who had spent 11 years building a patient architecture of removal and replacement received 31 years. He did not appeal. Marceline read the verdict on her phone during lunch at her own desk in her own office and felt not triumph, just the specific quiet of a structure that has finally been allowed to settle, the kind of peace that doesn't announce itself. It simply arrives, and you notice it because the weight you had stopped registering as weight is no longer there. She and Valen married on a Tuesday. 2 witnesses, a view of Chicago. No event, no announcement. Just 2 people who had spent their lives being used as instruments by other people's plans, choosing each other with full information and open eyes. She kept her name. Of course she kept her name. She had spent too long building it to fold it into someone else's. On the 1-year anniversary of the Orem night, the amber lounge, the dress she had never worn, the 30-second kiss she had calculated as a gesture, and that had already been someone else's opening move. She stood at the window of their apartment, overlooking the city, and held a glass of coffee going cold in her hands and thought about the woman who had walked across that room 14 steps and placed her hand on a stranger's chest. That woman had been invisible, not because she was small, because she had been placed in the background by people who needed her work more than they were willing to acknowledge her name. That was over. They called her invisible. The woman who did the work without the credit. The woman who built the access and handed it to someone else. The woman who was useful right up until she wasn't, and was then retired with the specific, quiet efficiency of something that had already been replaced. But in the end, she became the one no one could ignore. Not because of who stood beside her. Not because of what she had survived, because of what she built, with her own hands, in her own name, on her own terms. That is the end of Marceline's story. But it is not the end of stories like hers. If this one moved you, if you saw yourself in any part of what she carried, what she built, or what she refused to let go of, drop a comment below and tell me which moment hit you the hardest. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications so you never miss a story like this one. Stories about women who were underestimated, overlooked, and written off, and who built something extraordinary from exactly that. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Every share puts this story in front of someone who might be standing exactly where Marceline was standing at the beginning. The next story is already coming, and you do not want to miss it.